lines, getting in some updates from the G20 summit, and this regarding Vladimir Putin, the Russian president's update on his attendance. Well, what we know now officially is that Russian President Vladimir Putin will not be attending the G20 summit in New Delhi. This is now official statement coming in from the Kremlin. Russian president will not be attending the G20 meeting that is going to happen in New Delhi. So that is the latest we have right now. Clarification has come in. Moscow has officially stated that Vladimir Putin will not be attending the G20 summit that will happen in September, that is next month, in the national capital. That is the latest we have, viewers, right now. Vladimir Putin will be skipping the G20 meeting in New Delhi that is going to happen next month there. So that is something that is now officially, at least as of now, being stated by by Moscow. So in person, he will not be attending the summit. Of course, there will be representation from Moscow, but Vladimir Putin, there were speculations on his attendance, whether he will be appearing in person for the G20 meeting. That is what we have from the Kremlin as of now, that he has no plans to attend the G20 in India in person. So that is the latest we have. And Senior Executive Editor Abhishek was joining us on the phone line for more. Abhishek, this is what we have from the Kremlin right now, that Russian president will be skipping the G20 summit in New Delhi. He will not be attending that meeting. What more can you tell us on this, and what could be the possible reason?
Well, this is a big development. Yes, we have it from sources in the Russian government there, and the quote is attributable to the spokesperson of the Russian president, Dmitry Peskov, Rakshita, and he has told the Russian media that President Putin is focused on the special military operation, as they call it, the war in Ukraine, and so he would be skipping attendance, physical attendance at the G20 summit, like, of course, he did earlier with the BRICS summit, which has just concluded yesterday. And so it seems that the big issue of the possibility of clash between the West and the rest, which is West and Russia, China on the other side, has sort of been avoided with the Russian president deciding to skip it. Of course, he might join a couple of sessions virtually. Even if he does not, possibly he would be represented, like it happened in the case of BRICS, by the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. Essentially, we have seen since Bali, and in fact since the beginning of the war in Ukraine, that Russia has, the West has sought to corner Russia at every diplomatic platform and forum. And so it was in the case of Bali, for example. President Putin skipped it, and we saw some intense clashes to the extent that even a joint statement could not be brought out. And this has happened in the case of G20 presidency of India as well. We have seen most of the top-level summits involving, for example, the finance track and the health track and others. There have been difficulties in getting a joint statement going because the Russians, the West has always wanted some condemnation of Russia in it, to which China has not agreed. So China has been acting as a proxy of Russia, and it was in many ways a difficult diplomatic situation to handle had President Putin come. Remember, for example, he skipped BRICS because South Africa is a signatory to the International Criminal Court, and there is a warrant of arrest against President Putin, and South Africa would have been obliged to arrest him had he come. So it's a very difficult diplomatic situation, and by President Putin's absence, perhaps it does help the situation in the sense that the Indian diplomats would be a little less hard-pressed to tackle the standoff that spills over into these kind of engagements. But the breaking news development, of course, that President Putin is not coming. An announcement has come from Kremlin itself, with President's spokesperson Dmitry Peskov giving this bit of information to the Russian media just a while back.
All right. Yes. Thank you so much, Abhishek, for joining us there for your details and those inputs on that story. Remember, there's an international court of international criminal court arrest warrant also against Putin as well, and this, of course, puts him at risk of arrest while traveling. This could be one of the possible reasons behind this skipping In fact, that is the latest we have right now from the Kremlin. The main emphasis now is, of course, what we know right now is that that Vladimir Putin will not be attending the G20 summit in person. And of course, as Abhishek was telling us, that even for the BRICS summit, he attended the meeting virtually. He did not attend the meeting, the BRICS meet in South Africa in person. And of course, this is something that is a significant development. And now we have Dmitry Peskov, the Russian president's spokesperson himself, and I quote him here: President Vladimir Putin is not planning a trip to the G20 summit in India, which will be held in September. The main emphasis now is a special military operation. So there you have those words very clearly pointing out. And it's a very important statement coming in from Moscow. Remember, Vladimir Putin, as per Dmitry Peskov, is not planning a trip to the G20 summit. And Abhishek, in fact, is back with us on the phone line. Abhishek, if I go through this statement by Dmitry Peskov, he's also saying that the main emphasis now is a special military operation. What does this really mean here?
Well, obviously, this basically means that President Putin is preoccupied with the war in Russia, the war in Europe, and the Ukraine war, essentially. We have seen what happened just about 48 hours back. One of the known close aides of President Putin, the Wagner militia chief, Prigozhin, perished in a plane crash, which many attributed to the deep state of Russia itself. So obviously, there are spin-offs, there are difficulties of the Ukraine war. And President has to handle it day to day, minute to minute, and that's the reason why perhaps he's not coming. But then this is not the first time, as I was mentioning, Rakshita. This is perhaps in the last 1 year, dozen odd times it has happened that on all those multilateral and international platforms, wherever the West has a sway, the Russian president has avoided coming, including, for example, in the G20 summit last year in Indonesia, Bali. So this is a pattern which has been followed. So it's not specific to India. India should, in fact, I can tell you that the diplomats would be having a sigh of relief, because otherwise it would have been a major diplomatic situation to handle between the West on one side and Russia, China on the other. And as I mentioned, that many of the times even joint statement has been difficult to get. And with President Putin physically present, it would have been an additional red flag. So I think to that extent, it's a little better that he's not coming. But then, as I said, this is a reflection of the larger break in global diplomatic dialogue that has happened post the launch of the special military operations by Russia in Ukraine.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you so much, Abhishek, for joining us with all those details and the perspective on that significant development coming in from Moscow. Vladimir Putin is not planning to attend the summit, the G20 summit in New Delhi, that is scheduled for September.